They didn't just blindside me, they erased me. My name is Emily Waverly, and for nearly 2 decades, I poured my heart into the family business. I co-founded Waverly & Co. With my parents' skipped birthdays, vacations, and even my own engagement party to keep it afloat. I was the one in the trenches, late nights, last-minute crises, payroll panics. I was the glue. So when my older sister Claire, the so-called Golden Girl, was named CEO, I didn't expect applause, but I also didn't expect to be fired the very next day. There was no warning, no gratitude, just a sterile HR folder, stamped termination, and a pitiful severance package. The meeting I had scheduled for a quarterly review was hijacked into a champagne celebration with balloons, cupcakes, and backroom smiles. And just like that, my role was dissolved. My parents, who once called me the rock of the company, couldn't even look me in the eye. Claire. She smirked, said it was just business. But I knew better. I hadn't just been cut out, I'd been replaced. And they expected me to walk away quietly, like a loyal soldier outgrown by a shinier leader. What they didn't know, what they never saw coming, was that I had written a clause into our original incorporation papers, one that meant they couldn't erase me, not legally, that betrayal. It wasn't the end of my story. It was just the spark. They thought they buried me, but they forgot what I buried first. After I was pushed out of Waverly & Co. by my sister Claire, I went home in a fog. It was like walking through someone else's life. I sat at the same kitchen table where I'd once signed the papers that launched our family business, clutching a walnut pen engraved with my initials EW, a gift from my dad the day we inked our first vendor contract. My eyes fell on a plain envelope tucked in the bottom of the box they'd packed for me. I hadn't put it there. Inside was a notarized contract on our law firm's letterhead, dated 4 years back. My breath caught. I remembered the night it was signed. Claire had shown up at my apartment sobbing, panicked we'd miss payroll and lose our biggest client. I dropped everything, drove us to our attorney's house in Evanston, and wired $250,000 from my personal savings to keep the company afloat. In exchange, I was granted a 10% non-dilutable voting share in Waverly & Co., a clause that couldn't be voided unless I resigned. And I hadn't. I never did. That contract was more than paper. It was proof I still owned a piece of the company, a piece big enough to matter. That moment was a turning point, not because I suddenly had leverage, but because I realized they didn't know I did. They had tossed me out like an intern who misplaced a few spreadsheets, as if I hadn't been the one who negotiated our first lease, as if I hadn't carried the company through supplier disputes, market crashes, and internal chaos. They didn't just betray me, they underestimated me. I sat in the garage that night digging through old boxes of tax returns, emails, receipts, anything that could support what I already knew. And then I found it. A blue folder labeled 2019, Claire Emergency. Inside were emails, wire receipts, and a voice memo from Claire herself. Her voice trembled through the speaker. Emily, I don't know how to thank you. If I ever forget this, I shouldn't be in charge of anything. Well, she had forgotten. Or maybe she just assumed I had. The irony, Claire built her power on my silence banking, on the fact that I was always the loyal one, the one who never made a fuss, the one who showed up no matter how badly I was treated. She never imagined I'd fight back. She mistook loyalty for weakness, and that was her mistake. Because this time, I wasn't just hurt. I was focused. I labeled the folder Phoenix because I wasn't coming back the same woman they tried to erase. I was coming back with every receipt, every contract, every unshakable truth they hoped I'd forgotten. The next morning, I reopened my LinkedIn account for the first time in 6 years. The messages rolled in old colleagues, former interns, even vendors who had quietly wondered why I'd vanished. But one message made me pause. Lyle Patterson. Lyle had left the firm years ago quietly and without drama. He'd been one of the few people who truly saw me not as the other daughter, not as Claire's shadow, but as someone who mattered. His message was simple. Still got that spark. Let's build something with your name on the door. Full partner. That's when it hit me. They tried to cut me out, but they didn't even know what they still owed me. They were busy playing politics. I was holding the deed. So no, I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. They fired me thinking they were closing a chapter. But the truth, they just set the plot on fire. They tried to erase me, but I kept every page. After I uncovered the forgotten contract giving me 10% voting rights in Waverly & Co., I knew I had the legal foothold to push back. But instinct told me to dig deeper, not just to prove I still belonged at the table, but to reveal how far Claire and the others had gone to keep me out. That meant one thing: documentation. In the quiet of my garage, I began pulling down dusty boxes from old shelves, banker boxes marked 2016 tax returns, trade show orders, payroll Q3. Years of my life alphabetized in fading Sharpie. Among the stacks, I found a folder marked Claire 2019, Emergency. Inside, printed emails, scanned wire transfers, handwritten notes in my own script. I was reliving years of sacrifice in reverse. And taped inside the folder's cover, a flash drive. I plugged it into my laptop right there on the workbench, heart thudding. One audio file. I clicked. Claire's voice filled the room, shaky and grateful. Emily, I don't know how to thank you. If I ever forget this, I shouldn't be in charge of anything. I hit play again, then again. My hands didn't tremble. My eyes didn't blur. I was done crying. I was building a case. For the next several days, I combed through digital files, screenshots of marketing memos. I'd written emails I'd answered during holidays, payroll reports I'd personally approved while my sister vacationed in Palm Springs. I even found investor decks with my notes still visible in the margins. Each file was a brick in the wall I was building. Each memory sharpened me. This wasn't heartbreak anymore. This was war with receipts. Then my inbox pinged. Subject line, I don't agree with what they did to you. We should talk. Signed, Clark Monroe. Clark had been the company's accountant for as long as I could remember. Soft-spoken, always in a sweater vest. He'd never raised his voice in a meeting, but he noticed everything. He'd seen the backroom deals, the real books, and apparently he'd kept copies. We met at his apartment on a gray Wednesday evening. His living room smelled of burnt coffee and old paper. On the table were USB drives folders and a laptop labeled Not Forgotten. He looked exhausted. They told me to delete everything he said. Board minutes, ownership records, your voting rights. I was supposed to erase you. I said nothing, just waited. He pressed play on his laptop. Claire's voice came through again, this time cold and clipped. She was never meant to last. She's emotional dead weight. Next was my mother, barely above a whisper. We need someone more polished, more presentable. I sat back in my chair, silent. I hadn't disappeared. I'd been on unpaid leave taking care of my partner Ben during his chemo treatments. I kept the books running from hospital rooms. I answered emails during IV drips. And they knew it. They didn't just push me out. They rewrote the narrative. They used my silence as their excuse. Did they all sign off on it? I asked Clark. He nodded. Your dad hesitated, but Claire and your mom. They pushed hard. He didn't resist for long. I didn't lash out. I didn't cry. I just stood and said, I'm not here to punish you. I'm here to correct what they buried. Before I left, Clark handed me the USB drives. One more thing, he said quietly. The retreat you skipped, that's when it all started. I remembered it clearly. I was sitting by Ben's bedside, spoon-feeding him broth, while my co-workers posted selfies from a luxury spa in Lake Geneva. When I returned, half my responsibilities were gone. No one said a word. They didn't need to. They'd already decided I didn't belong, but I had the truth, and soon I'd have the proof. And Claire. She'd finally learn that the quiet ones, the ones who work while others perform, we don't disappear. We document, we endure. And when we rise, we bring everything with us. Turns out loyalty only mattered when it came from me. Claire Waverly wasn't just my older sister. She was the one everyone pointed to at holiday dinners and said she's the future. But I didn't mind. I was the one who kept things running behind the scenes, and I took pride in that. I showed up even when no one clapped, even when no one noticed. So I didn't think twice when I took unpaid leave to care for Ben, my partner, of 10 years after he was diagnosed with stage 2 lymphoma. His world was falling apart, and I made a choice. I answered emails between chemo sessions. I kept the payroll going from a hospital Wi-Fi connection. I didn't ask for sympathy, just time. While I fed Ben soup with shaking hands, Claire and my mother were hosting a team retreat at a luxury spa in Lake Geneva. When I came back, everything felt off. My projects were reassigned. My name disappeared from the org chart. The doors I used to walk through freely suddenly seemed to close before I reached them. They never said it aloud, but the message was clear. I wasn't welcome anymore. Back then, I thought I was being paranoid. I thought maybe I was just tired. But when Clark handed me the audio files, it all snapped into focus. In the recording, Claire's voice was smug, certain Emily's too loyal to fight back. That's why I'll win. She still thinks loyalty counts for something. That wasn't just strategy. That was betrayal in high heels. But the most painful part came from my mother. We need someone more polished, more presentable, as if being present during the hardest year of my life wasn't enough. That word stuck in my chest like a shard of glass. I hadn't missed the retreat because I was careless. I missed it because I was helping Ben stand when he was too weak to walk. And they used that absence, my love, my devotion, as evidence that I wasn't committed enough. They didn't care that I was suffering. They cared that I was inconvenient. And my father, the man who once told me, in this family, your word is your bond. He hesitated, but he didn't stop them. He let it happen. In one of the files Clark gave me, I found my forged signature on a deal I had never approved. Claire had signed my name. Sloppy work, too. Her handwriting looped letters differently than mine. She didn't even try to cover it well. She assumed no one would look that closely. She assumed I'd never find out, or worse, that I wouldn't fight if I did. But the thing about being overlooked your whole life is you learn how to see everything. You notice who's in the room. You remember what's said when they think you're not listening. And you don't just forget the people who show you who they really are. They thought I wouldn't push back because I never had. But there's a difference between staying quiet and staying blind. That night, I labeled the flash drive contingency, not for revenge, but for clarity, because I wasn't going to just come back. I was going to expose what they did when they thought no one would see. Claire always said business wasn't personal, but she made it personal the moment she used my grief against me. She didn't just take my seat at the table. She rewrote the story to make it look like I was never there. But I was, and I was done being the one who made room for everyone else. They thought I'd disappear. I decided to rise instead. I didn't go back to the kitchen table where I cried the first night they fired me. I needed distance-neutral ground to think. So I parked myself in a quiet cafe, tucked between a used bookstore and a faded real estate office, ordered a green tea, and slid into a corner booth. No heels, no power suits, just me, my laptop, and a leather tote holding the truth. That's where the idea of the Phoenix Plan was born. I didn't call it that at first. At the time, it was just digital clutter, old contracts, voice memos, scanned signatures. But as I sifted through it all, something shifted. It stopped feeling like evidence and started to feel like a blueprint. A blueprint not just for justice, but for something new. I began gathering everything I'd ever touched at Waverly & Co. Marketing decks I'd revised, vendor deals, I brokered payroll records. I personally approved every document, every email trail that proved I was never just an extra. I was the foundation they built on. But I didn't want to rebuild just for revenge. I wanted to rebuild for me. Then a message popped up on LinkedIn. Hey, stranger, still got that spark, I may have a proposition. Lyle Patterson. Lyle had left Waverly & Co. years ago. Quietly, no drama. Just a handshake and a knowing look. He was one of the few who saw through the family politics. One of the only people who'd ever told me, you're the one holding this place together. His message continued. I always knew who actually closed those vendor deals. Let's build something that's yours this time. Your name on the door. Full partner. Come talk. I stared at that message for a long moment, heart pounding. This wasn't a life raft. This was a launch pad. 2 days later, I stood outside a sleek glass building in River North. The lobby smelled of cedar citrus and espresso, not like the dust and legacy politics I'd left behind. Lyle greeted me with a firm hug and a grin. There she is, the ghost they tried to bury. Inside, I met his leadership team. People who asked real questions, people who met my eyes and didn't speak in passive-aggressive half-smiles. They showed me a bright, open conference room and slid a folder across the table. Partner track. No waiting in line. But I know you've got unfinished business. Take your time. That night, I went home and opened my laptop. I created a folder labeled Phoenix. Inside it, I saved every document, every file, every proof of what they'd done and who I really was. Then I found it. A contract I never remembered signing because I didn't. A scanned document with my name on it from 2019. Only the signature wasn't mine. It was Claire's written in my name. The same mistake she'd made before Wrong Loop's lazy forgery. She had submitted falsified paperwork to a legal body. I stared at the screen, a strange calm washing over me. This wasn't just corporate betrayal anymore. This was criminal, and so I printed it. I slid the pages into an envelope, wrote across the front in neat cursive to the Illinois Office of Business Conduct, confidential, for immediate review. Then I sealed it shut. They tried to write me out of my own story. But I was no longer the girl behind the curtain clapping for others. I was the one holding the match. And the Phoenix Plan. It was no longer a file on my laptop. It was the fire that would bring everything into the light. They gave me silence. I gave them truth. I didn't kick down doors. I didn't make threats. I did something far more dangerous. I got organized. By now, my Phoenix folder had turned into a digital fortress backed up, encrypted, time-stamped. It held every forged document, every manipulated contract, every whispered recording of how Claire and my mother had schemed to erase me from the company I helped build. But still, I didn't go public. Not yet. I needed the moment to be surgical, quiet, sharp, and irreversible. The opportunity came wrapped in silk and champagne. Claire was hosting a black-tie charity gala in downtown Chicago, the kind of event where her name would be plastered across banners and programs like royalty. Waverly Legacy, a night of impact. It was supposed to be her coronation. Instead, it would become her undoing. I wasn't on the guest list. Didn't matter. I walked into the ballroom wearing my charcoal blazer leather folio tucked under one arm. Chandeliers sparkled. The room buzzed with small talk and self-congratulation. Claire stood at the center, radiant in a white gown, working the room like a politician. Then she saw me. Just for a second, she froze. Then came the performance. She smiled, glided to the mic, and began her speech. We built Waverly & Co. on legacy, on trust, on knowing when to lead and when to let go. She paused, her eyes slicing toward me. Some of us understand that better than others. The crowd chuckled politely. I didn't flinch. I raised my glass and met her gaze with a smile that said, "You missed something. You'll feel it soon." As she disappeared backstage, I headed for the coat check. I didn't need to stay. Then it started. Her voice rang out in the hallway, sharp rising. "What do you mean?" "Access denied. That account is under my authority. Who signed off on this?" A board member stepped into the chaos, calm, collected. "It's been updated, Claire. Legally, we were notified this morning." Earlier that day, I'd filed the notarized revocation of her power at the Cook County Clerk's office. Everything she thought she controlled, company assets, trust accounts, voting authority, was gone. Legally, quietly, effectively, immediately. I didn't stick around to see the meltdown. I didn't need to. I'd heard that sound before. But later that night, as I got home, I noticed something off. My front door had fresh scratches near the lock. My mailbox dented. Security footage showed a figure near my vehicle. No face, no plates, just enough to feel like a threat. I sat in the dark for a long while, then played Claire's old voicemail again. She won't fight back. She never does. That's why I always win. I whispered to myself, not anymore. 2 days later, I walked into a neighborhood development meeting Claire was leading. She stood confidently pitching Phase 1 of the Waverly Riverfront Project property tied to our family trust. Without saying a word, I handed an envelope to the board chair. Heads turned. Claire's smile stiffened. Inside was the legal notice revoking her trustee powers. The room changed. The chair announced, "Before we proceed, we'll pause all pending decisions. This document raises legal concerns regarding asset control." Claire protested too loud, too fast. She knew the show was over. She just didn't know how to bow out. I didn't gloat. I didn't speak. I just sat in the back row as her voice cracked, and her confidence collapsed under the weight of her own lies. This wasn't revenge. It was reckoning. By the end of that week, the article Trina and I had prepared went live. The Silent Founder, What Really Happened, at Waverly & Co. side-by-side receipts, emails, contracts, founding forms with my name, voice recordings. Claire's narrative burned in the spotlight she had always craved, and I didn't feel erased anymore. I felt seen. For the first time in years, I wasn't surviving. I was building. After the court ruled in my favor, after the truth came out, and the spotlight shifted, I didn't rush to reclaim my old title or the office with my name on the door. Instead, I walked into a small co-working space I helped launch with 2 other women who, like me, had been pushed aside by people who couldn't see their worth. No fancy receptionist, no glass walls, just hardwood floors, real plants, and purpose. In the corner sat an old pine chair one my dad made years ago. I polished it, fixed the initials carved into the slat EW. I fastened a plaque to the back to the one who stayed silent, then spoke the loudest. I didn't need revenge anymore. I had something better: peace and purpose. That night, I recorded one last voice memo for myself. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. It arrives quietly in a chair, a courtroom, or a second chance. But when it comes, it brings stillness And stillness isn't weakness. It's the sound of finally knowing who you are. Sometimes the very people we fight to protect will be the ones who push us out. But when that happens, don't let bitterness win. Let clarity lead you back to yourself. Loyalty is beautiful, but not when it costs you your voice. You're allowed to outgrow places that only valued your silence. Have you ever had to walk away from something you built with your own hands just to find peace? Tell me your story in the comments. Your voice matters. It might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. And if Emily's story moved, you don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories of resilience, redemption, and reclaiming your worth. Because silence isn't strength, truth is.